Good morning. Welcome to this joint overview and scrutiny committee. I am Councillor Mary McLaren and I'm chairing the meeting today. May I first remind you of some domestic arrangements. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones and laptops are on silent. Actually, can I just add to that? If you've got your laptops in front of the microphone, can you make sure that you've got full access to the microphones? Thank you. Additionally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you are intending to do so, please inform the committee clerk. If you hear the fire alarm, leave the building immediately via a fire exit and make your way to the assembly point, which is in Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exit at each end of the floor. Do not enter the atrium, which is the ground floor area and walkways. If you're in the atrium and at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs, not the lifts. Do not enter the building until told it is safe to do so. We will now proceed to the formal part of our meeting. I would like to welcome the following people we have in attendance. This morning we've got Councillor Jessica Carter, who is Cabinet Member for Housing, and we've then got the following of we're waiting for another councillor, Cabinet Member, but hasn't arrived yet because of traffic problems. So I'd like to welcome the officers. Ama Anti-Yaboa, Corporate Manager for Housing Solutions. Victoria Bond, Assistant Manager for Housing Solutions. Rebecca Ward, Housing Strategy and Policy Officer. Susanna Farrer, Team Manager for Homelessness. Sarah Aldous, Team Manager for Early Intervention. Milicula Mopliho, Team Manager, Temporary Accommodation. And Stephanie Lloyd, Team Manager, Central Suffolk Lettings. Thank you. And helping us today as our lead officer for overview and scrutiny, we have Alicia Norman. Can I move to the agenda, please? Thank you. Apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies this morning from Councillor Rowe, but we have no substitutes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interests by members.
Thank you, Chair. I am a private landlord, so I'd like to declare that as an interest.
Thank you, Chair. And my wife is a private landlord, and I'm also a trustee of the Stowmarket Relief Trust, which may inadvertently get referred to later on.
Of a company that is a private landlord.
As is my wife.
Can we go to item 3? JOS 2326, to confirm the minutes of the joint meeting held on the 23rd of October 2023. Now, I must advise members that you are referring to the minutes as detailed in the table papers, not with those that was first issued with the agenda. So, are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? No. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Jameson, and a seconder. Councillor Smith. Thank you very much. The lead officer will conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress on Modern Gov. Thank you, Chair. That is 9 votes for and 1 abstention, so those are carried.
So the minutes of the joint meeting on the 23rd of October have been confirmed. Item 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Item 5, questions by the public.
None received.
And item 6, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair. Thank you.
So we've now come to item 7, which is JOS 23/27, Homelessness Reduction and Rough Sleeping Strategy 2024. I would like to invite Councillor Carter to introduce the report to the committee. Thank you, Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As the portfolio holder responsible for housing, it is my privilege to introduce the Homelessness Prevention and Rough Sleeping Strategy for 2024-2029. This strategy is a testament to our commitment to ensure that homelessness and rough sleeping are a rare, brief, and non-reoccurring events in our community. The strategy is grounded in the principles of prevention and early upstream intervention, which are central to our vision and operational ethos. The Homelessness Act of 2002 mandates all housing authorities to review homelessness within their jurisdictions and develop a strategy based on the findings. Our previous strategy for 2019-2024 has undergone a thorough review, and the insights gained have been instrumental in shaping this new strategy. The comprehensive Babergh and Mid-Suffolk Homelessness Review 2023, which serves as a foundation for this strategy. Homelessness is a complex issue that extends beyond the stereotypical image of a rough sleeper. It encompasses individuals and families living in insecure, unsuitable, or unaffordable housing, and those who are forced to leave their homes, often through no fault of their own. This strategy aims to destigmatise homelessness and empower residents to help seek at the earliest opportunity. It also focuses on early upstream intervention to prevent homelessness or proactivity. Our vision is clear: to make rough sleeping rare, brief, and non-reoccurring, to prevent homelessness through the early and upstream intervention. And to achieve this, we will focus on early prevention, working closely with those who have lived experiences, and develop a multi-agency approach to support people in rebuilding their lives. Our priorities include early intervention, making rough sleeping rare, ensuring the health and well-being of households in temporary accommodation, and mitigating the impacts of the cost of living. We have already made significant strides in addressing homelessness, such as developing an online advice service, Housing Aid, for easy access to housing options, established an early intervention team to focus on targeted early and upstream intervention, delivered domestic abuse champion training to raise awareness and provide support for those affected by domestic abuse. Going forward, we will resource the early interventions team adequately to maximise opportunities for preventing homelessness, establish protocols with other agencies for multi-agency approach to homelessness prevention, consider the needs of our rural communities and explore the viability of a mobile customer access point for housing services, and work towards obtaining Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation. In conclusion, this strategy is not just a document, it is a commitment to our residents that we will not rest until homelessness and rough sleeping are rare and brief in our districts. It is an ambitious goal, but with the strategies we have in place and partnerships we are building, it is within our reach. And if I can just take this moment just to thank the officers who have put this together and made it all possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. I'll just wait for Councillor Pearson to... Thank you. Members can now ask questions. Who's going to start the questions?
They have a presentation.
Oh, sorry. That wasn't on the agenda.
Sorry.
No. I understand now what you said to me earlier. I will ask the corporate manager to give us a presentation. That would be really helpful. Thank you, Emma.
No, Rebecca's going to give the presentation, but off the back of what Councillor Carter has said, it's just we're just quite passionate about homelessness within our service and resolving it, so we're hoping that this strategy builds on that, and we definitely hope that we will make some real headways in the next 5 years. So with Rebecca's presentation, she will go Rebecca's going to go through all the priorities, and at each point we'll ask questions after each section, each priority, so that we can take the questions then, if that's okay. Yeah, thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Rebecca Ward, Housing Strategy and Policy Officer, and I'm responsible for the monitoring of the homelessness strategy. I've been involved throughout this year in the development of this new draft homelessness reduction and rough sleeping strategy. This presentation seeks to provide you with some background information and context before looking at each of the 5 priorities in turn, setting out what has been achieved already and what officers will be focusing on next to contribute towards achieving the vision and aims of this new strategy. Okay, so to start with some background information, it is a statutory requirement for local authorities to carry out a homelessness review and to publish a strategy based on the findings of that review. All local authorities are required to publish a homelessness strategy once every 5 years. The previous joint homelessness strategy was adopted following endorsement by both councils in March 2019 and covered the period to 2024. A comprehensive homelessness review was carried out earlier this year. The purpose of the review was to establish the extent of homelessness in the districts, assess its likely extent in the future, identify what is currently being done and by whom, identify what level of resources are available to prevent and tackle homelessness, and to inform future homelessness services with the aim of preventing and managing homelessness. A survey of stakeholders and partners was also conducted, and the findings fed into both the homelessness review and into the development of this new strategy. The draft strategy will be consulted on for a period of 6 weeks, from Monday the 4th of December to Sunday the 14th of January. During this time, there'll be an open survey. This will be available to any resident or interested party, but will also be targeted to stakeholders, partners, members, and those with lived experience of homelessness. The draft strategy will also be presented to the Tenants Board, and there'll be a number of all-member briefing sessions. Okay, so moving on to the draft joint strategy. Following the findings and outcomes of the homelessness review, a vision and 5 priorities were identified and developed. Our vision is that rough sleeping is rare, brief and non-recurring, and that homelessness is routinely prevented through early and upstream intervention. 5 priority areas of focus have been identified to contribute to achieving this vision. These priorities are early upstream prevention and intervention, making rough sleeping rare, brief and non-recurring, ensuring the health and well-being needs of households are met whilst in temporary accommodation, expanding and future-proofing the role and remit of Central Suffolk Lettings to continue to improve access to the private rented sector, and mitigating against the impact of the cost of living. We will look at these priorities in turn and in more detail shortly. Before we move on to look at the priorities individually, just some information about how the strategy is structured. The strategy is supported and underpinned by a delivery plan. The draft version is in your papers. At present, it shows only the action and the action owners. This is the person who will be responsible for progress and providing updates. As you can see from this slide, there are multiple teams within the councils that will be contributing to the achievement of the vision and aims of this strategy. Further details such as target date, status and what success looks like will be added prior to proposed adoption of the strategy, following consultation and evaluation and incorporation of feedback in March of next year. The strategy will then be monitored on a quarterly basis and will be reviewed annually by Overview and Scrutiny as part of the annual review of the Joint Homes and Housing Strategy. Okay, so moving on to the priorities of this strategy. The first priority area is early upstream prevention and intervention. This strategy seeks to ensure that both prevention and early upstream intervention are at the centre of our service. The prevention of homelessness is mutually beneficial for both the councils and households. Early intervention strategies aim to support individuals and families in retaining housing or swiftly transitioning to safe accommodation with necessary support. This approach significantly reduces relief duty and main duty decisions and enables housing solutions officers to concentrate on relieving homelessness for already homeless households. Our focus is on creating customised pathways with wraparound support to ensure sustained tenancies for every client group. In terms of achievements, we have already created and established the early intervention team to focus on targeted early and upstream intervention. There is now one team manager and 4 housing solution officers focusing solely on early intervention work. We've developed and implemented a comprehensive online advice service for clients to access housing options advice, housing aid. We have sustained tenancies and prevented homelessness by ensuring tenancies remain financially viable via a team of financial inclusion officers. We have delivered domestic abuse champion training. This has been led by the Housing Solutions Domestic Abuse Link worker. There are now domestic abuse champions located across Babergh and Mid-Suffolk district councils who have received domestic abuse awareness training to develop knowledge on asking, responding, supporting and signposting people affected by domestic abuse. We've also established the Household Support Fund to work with households prior to the 56 days when, under legislation, they're threatened with homelessness. We've also focused on early intervention work to significantly reduce the time officers are spending making decisions on homelessness applications. As a result, there's only been 2 intentional decisions made since April 2023. In the next year, we'll be working on setting up protocols with other agencies to formalise early intervention multi-agency arrangements with probation, prisons, hospitals, adult care services and children's and young people services to work collaboratively and prevent homelessness for our most vulnerable residents. We'll be establishing early intervention hubs in our districts for face-to-face meetings to facilitate more effective communication, help to build strong relationships and increase engagement. We'll be working towards obtaining Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation to raise awareness of domestic abuse, to enable a proactive, not reactive service, focusing on households remaining in accommodation or working towards more managed moves. And we'll be creating a fast-track referral system to Central Suffolk lettings to ensure cases where homelessness can be prevented quickly through the use of the rent guarantee scheme are prioritised and dealt with effectively. We'll also be working on establishing team processes and links to other in-house teams, especially the financial inclusion team and Central Suffolk lettings, to complement service delivery. And we'll be considering the viability of a mobile customer access point for housing services to consider how we can best serve the needs of our rural communities.
Thank you. Any other members of the team going to present?
I think we're going to say any questions from anybody before we move on about early upstream prevention and intervention.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you've mentioned working towards obtaining Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation and the work that's involved in that, and that does seem to be quite considerable work. My query would be, on page 100, when you're talking about that, at the end it said sign up to the accreditation would need to be agreed to and supported at a senior leadership level. So obviously that requires a commitment from the senior leadership, but does that not, and perhaps this is a question for one of the portfolio holders, does that not require then a commitment from each of the local authorities to actually achieving that, because I think it's a very good idea that we do achieve it, but recognise the work that's involved and the resources that would be required. So perhaps I could have an answer from one of them. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
I'm quite happy to answer that question. We've recently taken and done a presentation to SLT about the DAHA accreditation and what's going to be required and resources required. We're currently going to the Good Start Project Board on Tuesday this week to look at that. So hopefully there is commitment, there is a broad consensus of this is something that we would like to do as an organisation, obviously permitting on resources. So that's what we're doing at the moment, is looking at that aspect of it.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you. You just mentioned, I believe, in regards to a mobile hub for viability. Would this be a physically moving vehicle of some sort, or are you talking about hiring rooms in certain facilities for somebody to go into? I'm just wondering if it's going to be a physically moving like a vehicle. Have you thought about the access into the vehicle, as some rough sleepers or individuals may have mobility issues, may not be able to access up? So just querying in that.
I think for me, it's the because we have such rural locations and transport tends to be an issue. It's really about getting officers to residents, rather than expecting people to try and come to us or locations that we already have existing. We want to be looking at creative ways in terms of, can we get some sort of maybe a prevention bus or an advice bus which takes the service to the residents in their locality, for a sense. So I don't think we're necessarily envisaging having people being on the bus. It's more about getting the services out to them more than others. So that's what we're looking at doing in that sense.
Any more questions from the committee? Because we're going to take each stage and go with questions each time. So can I ask any of the councillors that in the room have got questions? No? Councillor Malvisi.
But of the 579 cases in Babergh, how many were domestic abuse?
I can have a little look and I'll break it down and I'll let you know probably at the end of this session. Is that okay?
Fine, super, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on the back row? Oh.
Okay, moving on. The second priority area to focus on is making rough sleeping rare, brief and non-recurring. Rapid intervention and prevention methods have significantly reduced rough sleeping in our districts, particularly for new cases and those at risk. However, addressing long-term rough sleepers with complex needs requires a more tailored approach involving support for mental health, drug and alcohol dependencies and institutional experiences. In terms of achievements, we have already ensured contact is made with all rough sleepers within 24 hours of getting a referral. We have accessed funding streams when available for additional support to tackle rough sleeping following the initial successful Rough Sleeper Initiative bid in 2019. We have participated in multi-agency panels to manage, monitor and find housing solutions for the hardest to house clients. We have procured 19 specialist bed spaces where rough sleepers are accommodated, including street-to-step beds, transitional beds and move-on units. We've also provided suitable accommodation for rough sleepers in extreme weather conditions under the severe weather emergency provision. We have provided regular outreach work to those individuals who have disengaged from services to facilitate ongoing support. We have supported service users in settled and move-on accommodations to sustain their tenancies. We've procured the services of BEAM to work with service users who have been marginalised from work, training and education to provide opportunities to get back into employment. And next, we will be focusing on training for staff to identify root causes of recurring rough sleeping and unstable housing histories for rough sleepers with complex needs using person-centred trauma-informed interview techniques. We will be engaging multiple agencies through co-production and joint protocols to provide intensive support, including mental health, NHS outreach teams and drug and alcohol services. We'll be contributing to cross-county co-production work with Campbell Tickle Consultants to establish a multi-district approach to service delivery commissioned by the Suffolk Housing Board. And we'll be forward planning for the ending of Rough Sleeper Initiative funding in 2025, including team structure and continuation of service delivery.
Thank you, Rebecca. Questions? Councillor Grandin.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask what kind of accommodation? Obviously, this is quite a sort of difficult part of the mix, and they need, or may need, a certain amount of additional care to which you've referred. What kind of accommodation do you generally refer these people to? During COVID, quite a lot of people went into hotels and that kind of thing, but I presume they're not hotels now, and you talk about long-term accommodation, or are they hotels that they can stay in for a long time? Could you perhaps elucidate?
So the Rough Sleeping Initiative funding provided us with money to use properties. We have step beds, so we have street-to-step beds where people who are rough sleeping go into those step beds initially. And
what does that mean? Sorry.
They can be a room in a house of multiple occupation, or we also have some self-contained. And then we keep individuals there till we assess their needs, and then we look at a transitional bed, which will be a longer-term bed. Once again, we have rooms in houses of multiple occupation. We also have bed sits, we have one bed flat, so it sort of depends on the assessment of that person's needs. And then we have longer term accommodation where we will provide support, and we provide support all the way through that journey. And we also try and get in other services, mental health, drugs and alcohol, GPs, health professionals, to just make sure we can help sustain tenancies moving forward when people move on from our rough sleeping pathway. So it's quite a long pathway. We have lots of different accommodation depending. Some people really thrive by being in a house and sharing with people. You know, other residents really don't want that. So we have to be quite person-centred when we do that first approach.
That sounds very good, because obviously they would all have different, or may all have different needs, and it's quite an intensive kind of help that could be needed and need a lot of intervention.
Sometimes we struggle to get people in off of the streets because they're really scared, they're really nervous, they've been through the system so many times, they don't trust us. It's really hard. So sometimes it can take months. During COVID, during the Everyone In time, we had a gentleman that had been sleeping rough for 3 years, and we got him in during the Everyone In. We've worked with him. He's now rehoused. He's of pension age, an older man, and all those years sleeping rough, and now we've got him in. And that was intense, long work, you know, over a period of years to get him to that position. But that's what we need to do. We need to change those ways of people.
May I ask another question, please?
Please do, Councillor.
I think we tend to think of our district as being not having too much of a problem. So I don't know whether that's due to your good interventions or that we're just not aware. Where do they tend to be in our main towns, or could you give a little bit of a picture of this, please?
We would look at rough sleepers as we have incidental rough sleepers, so we have people that sort of come through our district, or people who have had a relationship breakdown, fallen out of work, and they're people that we can tend to move on quite quickly. And then we have the other more entrenched rough sleepers. So the incidental ones tend to be in our town areas, market towns. The entrenched very rural, and we have been out and we have found people with tents in hedges and in fields that we would not have known about. And the officers will patrol areas. We have Street Link that inform us if there's sighting. The public can get hold of us to say, we've seen a tent. The entrenched people are the individuals that we have most difficulty with getting them in, because they have their setup. We had a gentleman who was in a car park. He was in his 80s, and he'd been in a car park sleeping for months and months, and he just didn't want to come in. He'd had a change of circumstances, and I'm here, I'm safe, I know where I am. But for us, that's untenable for him long term. But we needed to convince him that coming with us, he could trust us, and would make the right decisions with him. So it's I would urge you all to come out with the Rough Sleeper team if you have some time. It's very interesting work, and you get to speak to the service users as well, who will feed into the strategy, because they're the ones that we base the strategy on. Where are the barriers? Where are the obstacles? What can we do to get over those? Tell us, because we can't make write a strategy without people's input.
I've been hearing that quite a lot of people in this position find themselves sleeping in cars.
Yep.
Does that come under this?
Yes, it's rough sleeping
as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And caravans, camper vans as well. We look at that. It's all rough sleeping, not rough sleeping. They're not on the streets, but it's housing that can't be. What's the word, Emma? Sustained. Thank you. So we did the rough sleeping count last week. Those results have not been published yet, and but I can tell you here, we had 3 people in Sudbury and 1 person in Stowmarket, and they were all people that we knew, people that we were working with and trying to pull in. So we had no new rough sleepers. So that's a really good result. Although 4 towns sounds terrible, it's a very good result. We knew where they were, and it was a targeted approach on that night to see them, but nobody else. So it is very interesting. You're welcome to come out with us.
Thank you. That's really interesting and very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Scarr.
Thank you, Chair. My question is sort of the forward planning after the Rough Sleeper initiative funding finishes in 2025. I'm not exactly certain how much money we got as joint councils for that, but obviously there's some financial implications for us going forward, and a commitment therefore in the lack of, if there is no more initiative funding available from central government. How are you going to plan for that? Because that's quite a considerable funding income stream to provide the service, and we've expanded the service in order to meet that. So it's how do you stop us going off a cliff face in 2025?
I'll pick this one up. I think it's something that I'm quite conscious about, because we have a whole team structure around that, providing that service for our residents who are sleeping. So I suppose for me, the question is how do we keep the same level of service? So it's about looking at what we do, the systems we have in place, the terms of how many officers are we going to need, what can we afford to deliver? I think that's what it's going to come down to, is what can we afford to deliver to maintain this level of service, to make sure that it doesn't fall backwards and we end up with people rough sleeping on the streets where we can't meet their needs. So I suppose this is something that we've always known is going to come, because we don't know if there's going to be any further funding in 2025. So it will be looking at restructuring the team, the service, and what does that mean, where do they sit, and what that structure looks like, we're not quite sure yet, but it has to be something that fits within our envelope of what we can afford within the existing housing solution service. So that's what we'll be looking to. And for me, it's always about value for money, and also about making sure whatever we deliver is sustainable going forward. So that's definitely a consideration. So I think what we're having to look at is the whole service, because rough sleeping has got this extra special funding, additional funding, but for me, rough sleeping is homelessness. It's a Part 7 application that everyone is making. So it's how do we make sure that that particular cohort still gets the additional support they need, given their complex needs, and as Vicky has said, the amount of officer time it's going to require, because you usually don't get them off the streets the first time round. It's going to take time, and what does that look like? So we're going to obviously have to look at our numbers of the rough sleepers that we're helping, what's happened with the RSI funding in terms of what did we do, the numbers that we saw, what does that mean in terms of caseload for officers, and actually what does delivery look like, because it's going to look different, and that's something that we're quite aware of and attuned to. So it's not going to be the same. We might go down to 2 officers, I don't know right now, but those are things that we're generally having consideration now and planning for, and seeing what that looks like and what that costs to deliver and how that works across the both districts.
Councillor Wyman next.
Councillor Scarf asked exactly the same question.
All right. Councillor Carter.
I think Vicky wants to add to it as well.
Could I? Thank you, Councillor Carter. Thank you, Councillor Carter. I just wanted to say that when the Rough Sleeper Initiative, when we went for the funding back in 2019, so much has changed. So theoretically, by 2025, we should have solved our rough sleeping problem. Clearly, we're not going to, and nobody is going to, because things have changed with the pandemic and the cost of living. So I think, DLUC, they're going to have to start thinking, well, they must be thinking now, it's probably a plan now about what we're going to do, because we have reduced it, we have made it a better journey, we haven't eradicated it as we really wanted to. So, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Having, in a former life, having spent some time on the street and been homeless at home, I can say that the improvements we have made are astounding, so thank you for that. And I would really like to take you up on the offer to go with the team sometime. I would say, in the report, there's a case study about a gentleman with his dog. And I do know that for certain rough sleepers, they will not engage with us out of fear, because they will be separated from their animals. And I wanted to check, what engagement are we having with those, and when we're talking about beds and these houses, what is happening to their animals? Because it's like it's a crutch, a safety net. It's not just when you separate somebody from there, it's like a lifeline. So what agencies are working with for the animals? Are we working with something like a street vet like they have in London? And what happens to if they have a dog or a cat? Are they housed with them, or are we looked after in temporary accommodation, or how goes there? Thank you.
I was going to say I can pass you over to Michaela, who's our temporary accommodation manager, to answer that one. Thanks, Mick. Okay.
Hi, I'm Michaela. I manage the temporary accommodation for Babergh Mid Suffolk. We've sort of been developing a pet policy where we take it on a case-by-case basis. There's a lot of people now who have emotional support animals and they are registered. So we have to really be aware of that, in considering people's disabilities and need for their pets. We actually do permit pets into some of our temporary accommodation where we can facilitate that, because we recognise how important those pets are to people, especially those facing homelessness. So yeah, it's something that we are working on to keep pets with their owners, and it's in our policy that we will try to facilitate that where possible. We also have to be really mindful of risk though, if we're in sort of HMO type accommodation, shared accommodation, especially. I don't want to mention, but we have had XL bullies and, large dogs in our accommodation as well. So that's a big concern, because then they could pose a risk to other residents and staff. So we do really have to be mindful when we're looking at people's situations, which we have to do on a case-by-case sort of basis.
Can I go in again, Councillor Carter, please? Because if we can't accommodate for whatever reason, it is in our Homelessness Code of Guidance that we will look at what we can do to provide other accommodations. So there have been times when we've paid for kennels or catteries for animals when people can't afford it, or we've looked at payment plans around things like that. We would also do that if it came to veterinary care. If somebody couldn't afford it, we could look at sort of repayment plans or working with local vets to enable that to be easier for people to access. So yeah, we're very open to animals, but as Mick says, sometimes you could have a whole house with a lot of different animals in there, which could be very hard to manage. So, but yes, we are mindful of that.
Have you got another question, Councillor Carter? Oh, right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. You said that we won't hit the targets that we'd set before because of COVID and the cost of living crisis. Looking into this, it seems like ever such a lot of things are going badly wrong at the moment, like lack of rental properties, rental prices through the roof. We're a rural location which doesn't really suit the benefits system. We've got discretionary, we've got local housing allowance that isn't moving anywhere, and we're propping it up with the discretionary housing payment. Are we going into crisis with this, or are we just going to miss our figures by a little bit, or is this going badly wrong? Thank you.
I'll answer that question. I think everyone has this really ambitious target of ending rough sleeping. I come from the point of view is that you can't end it because people are rough sleeping for a number of myriad of reasons, you know. So I think it's making it rare and brief and non-recurring is the real crux of the matter, so that we don't end up with entrenched rough sleepers. I think generally in terms of the whole countrywide experience, there is a crisis in terms of all the different things happening at the same time, which doesn't help. If you have one thing happen, then yes, you try and mitigate against that. But I think it's really difficult when you are combating against LHA, local housing allowance rates, which are not where we need them to be to help people to access the private rented sector. Because I think it has to be recognised that the private rented sector is a tenure of choice for some residents, and we need to make sure that we try and maintain that, which is why we have Central Suffolk lettings, so that we can enable access to that. I think for us, the context of Babergh Mid Suffolk is that we're managing the situation. You know, we'll always try and be really innovative, and we always try and sort of horizon scan of what could the issues be and what's cropping up, which is why we have a data analyst within Housing Solutions, which we look at the trends in terms of why are people approaching, what are the reasons. So that helps us focus on, do we need to be focusing more on these types of situations and look at what's happening and how we mitigate against that, which is why we have the early prevention team to sort of, I want us to change the behaviours of our residents in terms of coming to us as early as possible, which is why we have the online tool, Advice Aid, where they can go and have a look at their situation, get a little bit of housing advice to understand what their situation is. Because in these types of situations, people often come to us when the problem is a lot bigger, and if it come to us when, say, you were at £100 worth of rent arrears, or you were feeling like, I'm struggling and I can't afford this at the moment, is there help out there for me? Because the earlier and the more upstream you are with the prevention, the cheaper it is actually. You know, if you come to me and you're in fear of affordability, we can deal with that. But if you come to me and you've got £6,000 worth of rent arrears, it's a different type of solution that you're looking at. So it's a part of educating residents in terms of, if you have a problem, you come and get housing advice from your local authority, which tends not to be what people do at the moment. We're sort of the last place they come to for advice. And it's often, in my experience, been the case that, if you'd come earlier, we could have cleared your £100 worth of rent arrears. We could have a negotiation with your landlord to see how we can put things in place. We could have talked to benefits to look at, maximising your income. So we could have done all those things. So I think it's us about making people and residents aware that we're here, and that's what we're for. It's almost as if, if someone thinks about buying a house, they'll go talk to their bank. So I really want us to be in a position where if our residents think, I want a little bit of housing advice, regardless of tenure, because we're tenure neutral, I might go talk to my local authority and get some advice from them. So that's where we're hoping to be the direction of travel, because it's always about your planning and preparation and how you give people the tools in order to navigate, because there's always going to be some sort of crisis and some sort of issue. But if people have given the correct tools to understand, okay, I'm in this situation. Oh, I can get DHB. I can go talk to my local authority. Am I on the right amount of benefits? What other options are there out there for me? I'm on a 0 hours contract, and this is really affecting my ability to afford stuff. Are there training courses I could go on? What's out there? So I think there's a lot of different things that we could be doing to support our residents, and actually it's about empowering them to have the tools in order to deal with the situations they come up against. So I think that's the thing that we can do, because no matter what happens, there's going to be a crisis of some sort, there's going to be some issues, and we just need to give people the tools in order to sort of help themselves with us there supporting them.
Do you want me to say about the summit?
Councillor Granton. I'll come to other councillors when the committee have finished asking questions.
Thank you,
Councillor
Madam
Granton.
Chairman. On page 27 of our report, you list the numbers of units of temporary accommodation that we have available in our districts. Are those units owned by the districts, or are they private accommodation? And also, are they sufficient? Do they tend to be sufficient? I'm sure it fluctuates, but generally, is that sufficient numbers for the needs in our districts? Or do you sometimes have to go outside our districts for such accommodation?
Most of the stock is owned by us. They're our own properties. We've got a few that we've taken from housing associations, and I think there's one from a United Reformed Church. We do sometimes have to use hotel accommodation, but that all tends to be within our districts. I don't think we go outside of our districts at all. Rarely. So they tend to be in our districts. I mean, we have a statutory duty to house people who are in priority need regardless of the numbers. So whatever happens, if we have to source alternative accommodation, that is what we will do. We always try and keep people within our districts if that can be the case. I mean, there are peaks and troughs. There are times when we've got a little of give within the system, and then there are times where we could be struggling depending on the demands on the service and what's happening. So you can never have enough temporary accommodation ever. I'll challenge anyone on that. But we're always looking at how we can use our current stock. You know, if we get properties back from housing relating support, we will look, can we use that for additional units of temporary accommodation going forward? So we're constantly looking at how our demand and then what the supply is likely to be. Michaela and the team are always quite clear about the pressures, what's going on, and negotiating good rates as well if we have to go to external providers, but majority of the properties we have on our temporary accommodation are from our own stock.
And is the demand seasonal?
It depends.
Not as much as it used to.
Yeah, it used to be, you could tell when if you had the major holidays, summer holidays, Easter, Christmas, it used to be quite quiet, not so bad, and then anything between it would peak. But right now, what we're experiencing is the demand is quite high at the moment. You know, there have been points when we have run out of temporary accommodation, but we will find some more accommodation because that's our job. You know, our job is to accommodate people, and our job is to make sure we've got enough placements to place people. Unfortunately, that could mean that we might have to shift to commercial hotels in a very short period of time, but then we'd look to move them on to alternative temporary accommodation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions from the Councillor Matheson? I'll come after Councillor Malvese. But are there any more questions from the committee before I go to visiting councillors? No? Councillor
it's not quite a question, it's more a question and an observation, because I'm coming to this as the mental health champion for Babergh District Council. And Councillor Terence Carter raises some very valid issues with pertaining to dogs being pets, etc. Because for rough sleepers, a dog represents safety, because that animal will protect the rough sleeper. And to claim that you're going to end rough sleeping, I feel is unrealistic. It's a wonderful ideal, But unless we remove the factors that actually make people become or go homeless, and the biggest one is sexual abuse, violence, and mental ill health. So the council is in effect providing a safety net for those people. But I'm sure that most of the people you find sleeping under hedges will be men and not women. Yeah. Well, that was my experience in Scotland.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, firstly, eradicating rough sleeping wasn't our idea. That was the Department of Levelling Up. They told us we were going to eradicate rough sleeping by 2025. We probably...
And if you eat hard, you're going to come in lower.
Quite possibly. We have done very well as districts, to be fair. We like to think that we can signpost and wrap around support to our rough sleepers, because we're difficult. We're not supporting, we are housing, and it is very difficult. We don't see many women rough sleeping. If we do, they are potentially, you know, the most vulnerable people, and harder to work with as well once you lose that trust. So yes, we don't think we will ever eradicate it. However, that's what we need to try. I have got an answer for you, Councillor Malvazy, as well, about the domestic abuse. Do you want me to say it now?
Yeah,
Might just as well. I can do. I thought it might be interesting for everybody. So so in Babergh District Council, out of 593 applications so far from April the 1st, 41 of those stated domestic abuse as their prime reason for being homelessness. Now, we do often have it counted as a second thing as well. So somebody might have had a notice on their private property, and then they've disclosed to us that they did suffer domestic abuse. But so that's 18.22%. No, sorry, 15.47% in Babergh are domestic abuse as the first reason, and in Mid Suffolk it's 18.22%. So not dissimilar really. It is rising all the time. In my experience over the years, and I've been doing this for over 20 years, it is getting worse, and that's about people disclosing. You know, that we've got different routes for people to be able to tell us, disclose issues, seek support, the judicial system, the police systems. It's just easier for people to talk about domestic abuse, and I see that as a rise in the main instance. And of course we have to look at things like the cost of living, housing crisis, and other global crisis as well that's going to affect people's relationships. So there's lots of things in there. The DAHA accreditation would be really worthwhile, and I think it's something that districts and boroughs are doing nationwide to try and make sure we're all doing the same thing for people. I hope that's helped.
Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. I was struck by Councillor Caston's question, particularly, you know, whether we're kind of heading into a really difficult time. With the mortgage rate increasing, a year or so ago now, there's this sort of nationally reported that that landlords, small-scale landlords, are selling up, and you know, and this is, are we seeing additional no-fault evictions for that reason? And if we are seeing that locally, you know, actually happening, are we considering possibility of actually buying properties in order to avoid the tenant being evicted so that the landlord can sell?
No, I think I'll address the first part, then I'll hand over to Steph on Central Suffolk Lettings. I mean, we do get approaches from private landlords sometimes to see if we can buy and acquire the units, but it will have to be looked at if it's viable for us to do so, because there's also the aspect about maintaining the property when it comes into our stock. That will be an issue, but we try and see how we can negotiate with the landlord in terms of keeping the tenant in for as long as possible. Buying isn't something that's really been part of our plans per se. But it would depend on the circumstances of that individual. But we would have to look at the HRA business plan in terms of what is in the budget in terms of acquisitions. And it has to be affordable, it has to make sense, you know. So, yeah. But I'll hand over to Steph, who's better placed.
Hi, Stephanie Lloyd, team manager for Central Suffolk Lettings. We've got a portfolio of about 100 private rented properties, and we have seen a really small percentage of landlords sort of leaving our scheme to sell, very small. I think maybe we've had one to actually sell. We've had someone else who has increased the rent because of their mortgage rate has gone up. Our kind of stock retention is usually quite good. We're able to offer like a 5-year plan, so which has been fine when landlords have, if they're mortgaged, if they've got a longer term rate. So we can offer some security to sort of mitigate that problem. But we have seen a bit of an impact. We have seen some movement, and most of our stock are landlords who have between 1 and 5 properties, as is the largest percentage in the UK stock anyway. So we are predicting that we may lose some.
Is that it, Councillor Matheson? Yes. Thank you. Can I... Oh, Councillor Carter.
Apologies, the question I had occurred to me before has come back to me. Regarding the stock that we have, I've mentioned regarding pets, but what for the beds, what portion of stock do we have that is accessible for those that actually maybe have a mobility issues? Or my own experience was when I was waiting there, I was told that there wasn't any accommodation for myself to be in when I was disabled. Well, I am disabled, but there wasn't any accommodation for me, and that was a few years back. Have we improved and got more accessible stock?
We have improved, Councillor Carter, yes. It is quite bespoke. We have 3 or 4 units in each district that are accessible, and we've got some units that have got flush floor flat showers and different things for different people's mobility issues or disability issues. We have got a new property that's coming back to us. It's been leased to Orwell Housing for quite a number of years in Hawley. It's coming back to us, and we are hoping to make that a unit of 4 flats that are going to be accessible for all disabilities. So there's even a bath in there that's fully converted for people. So we're just working on that at the moment. It's just come back from Orwell Housing, and we're looking at plans to do that. So yes, we have improved. I would still say we still struggle sometimes with people with different disabilities, and we have to then look at our stock, and we do take things out of stock. We do make changes and use them as temporary accommodation, and then sometimes the people stay in those tenancies. We've done that quite often, so it's always a challenge. I wouldn't say we're on top of it, but we are in a really positive position, better than we were 5 years ago, definitely.
Thank you, that is brilliant to hear, really is. A final question occurring to me. There are instances where families find themselves, or partners find themselves on the street. How is our policy do we try to house together, or are there instances where they have to be, for any reason, housed separate, or what is the grounds here if they are more than one individual that needs to have a bed for or to be rehoused?
We have never housed somebody in temporary accommodation and split the family up. Never.
My experience was I wouldn't house with my wife at the time, but that was going back quite some years ago.
Okay, yeah, no, not in my experience. We haven't. We've never split a family up, have we, because of disability needs? No. Yeah, that would be interesting actually to get your views on that outside this meeting, possibly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just remind committee members that we're going through each priority, and questions really need to be targeted at each priority as it's on the screen. However, Rebecca, you're getting a lot of other questions that are outside each priority. Do you want to complete your presentation and then, because you've got 5 priorities, haven't you? What would you like to do?
Yes, I think it's a good idea, Councillor McLaren. We'll finish the presentation and then we'll have questions at the end.
And I've noticed that the questions actually are way out of the priority we've got on the screen. And I want you to be able to advise members as much as possible. So would you like to continue, Rebecca? Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the third area of focus, which is ensuring the health and wellbeing needs of households are met whilst in temporary accommodation. This strategy is focused on preventing homelessness and minimising the use of temporary accommodation. However, if temporary accommodation can't be avoided, then we are committed to ensuring a positive health and wellbeing journey and avoiding contributing to homelessness trauma. Efforts are underway to enhance the entire temporary accommodation experience, offering more signposting and multi-agency engagement. The focus is on implementing measures to mitigate the impact on children's education, health and socialisation. In terms of achievements, we have already established 4 temporary accommodation refuge sites where we provide ready-to-move-in furnished properties with food parcels, children's toys and books, household items, kitchen utensils and new bedding. We've secured 12 units of temporary accommodation with sanctuary housing, which also provide a higher level of support for single people. We've appointed a secondary settlement officer to focus on enabling households in temporary accommodation to be actively looking for housing opportunities, maximising incomes and ensuring households are tenancy ready. We've procured the services of BEAM, which is a homeless social enterprise, to assist marginalised service users into employment, education and training. In the coming year, we'll be introducing a minimum standard of temporary accommodation for children, including provision of sterilising equipment, child and baby equipment such as stair gates and age-appropriate books and toys. We'll be providing pre-tenancy training for all households in temporary accommodation, and a pilot of this started on the 26th of September this year. We'll be ensuring Wi-Fi and internet access is available at each site with accompanying digital skills training from the cost of living team. We'll be exploring setting up a notification system which ensures that at the point a household registers as homeless, relevant existing services are informed, such as education, health and social care. We'll also be working on implementing a project of planned work and upgrades on all temporary accommodation, making adaptations to a new temporary accommodation unit to create adapted rooms which are wheelchair accessible. We'll be working on destigmatising temporary accommodation and homelessness by sharing experiences in a realistic and respectful way, ensuring that we are not reinforcing unhelpful attitudes and stereotypes. We'll also be adding testimonials from households and virtual tours and reviews of temporary accommodation filmed with tenants onto our website. And we'll also be working on improving our temporary accommodation green spaces and encouraging gardening interaction from residents to assist with improving general health and well-being. Okay, priority 4, which is expanding and future-proofing the role and remit of Central Suffolk Lettings to continue to improve access to the private rented sector. Expanding resident access to the private rented sector cuts reliance on bread and breakfast accommodation and eases the burden on temporary accommodation. Shifting housing duties to the private sector can expedite finding new homes, diversify housing options and preserve social housing for those in urgent need. The Central Suffolk Letting Service, established in spring of 2020, is dedicated to cultivating enduring relationships with landlords and letting agents and providing diverse, quality, affordable and secure tenancies in the private rented sector. In terms of achievements, we have already cemented Central Suffolk Lettings as a well-established brand with an online presence and a growing portfolio of properties. We've carried out a survey of landlords to inform direction for the service. We've negotiated houses of multiple occupation through work with landlords to meet the needs of under 35s who are limited in the private sector by local housing allowance rates. Central Suffolk Lettings now has a 3-bed house in multiple occupation in Stowmarket in its portfolio. We've also collaborated with the Empty Homes team and landlords to bring properties back into use through the Central Suffolk Letting schemes. In the next year, we'll build on this work and we'll be further promoting Central Suffolk Lettings to extend its reach, including to let boards and targeted advertising. We'll be raising the profile of Central Suffolk Lettings within Babergh and Mid-Suffolk District Councils by linking in with economic development and planning to provide an offer at the start of housing development. We will be acting on the results of the recent survey of landlords, including considering extending the current landlords package or delivering an extended service. We'll be providing pre-tenancy training in conjunction with the Stone Foundation to contribute to maintaining tenancies, returning tenancies in a better condition, decreasing antisocial behaviour and preventing homelessness. We'll also be focusing on creating a new website and increasing on our online presence, expanding the HMO portfolio, building on the Empty Homes project, including more publicity, communication and an offer to landlords to work with us. We'll also be focusing on being an active part of the Landlords Forum in partnership with Safe Suffolk Renters. We'll be procuring a new tenancy management system to support the growing business. We'll also be considering a charge to landlords who come onto the scheme, as this could generate an income for Babergh and Mid-Suffolk District Councils. And we'll be quantifying the cost-saving value of Central Suffolk Lettings to Babergh and Mid-Suffolk District Councils. Okay, so this is the fifth and final priority area, which is mitigating against the cost of living. Rising fuel, food and essential costs in conjunction with existing vulnerabilities are amplifying the risk of immediate hardship and reduced well-being for many households, and this is disproportionately affecting some communities. This prompted Babergh and Mid-Suffolk District Councils to launch a 5-point action plan in May 2022. This cost of living plan is regularly reviewed due to uncertainties, global challenges, market volatility, inflation, and dynamic shifts in household budgets. Housing costs add to the strain for many households and are exacerbated by stagnant local housing allowance rates and increased mortgage interest rates. All of this converges to heightened concerns about rising homelessness in the districts. In terms of what's already been achieved, we've sent targeted communications to temporary accommodation tenants and Babergh and Mid-Suffolk tenants to highlight advice and help available and to encourage accessing support earlier. We've updated our web pages to ensure that residents can be signposted effectively to other agencies for advice and support. We've established the Household Support Grant, which is funded by central government, for households to apply to if they're struggling to pay rent or service charges. We've introduced an internal referral form between ourselves and Mid-Suffolk Citizens Advice to speed up the referral process and to get help quickly to those who need it. We've also continued to work closely with the Department of Work and Pensions and Citizens Advice to tackle the impacts of welfare reforms and the rollout of universal credit. We've monitored repayment agreements and the number of evictions for rent arrears to consider the success of our budgeting advice and affordability checks so we can help clients to manage their income effectively. We've launched a fuel poverty toolkit for frontline members of staff to use. We've administered winter warmth grants for community spaces, and we've mapped all the food banks operating in the districts and shared this information. Next year, we'll be focusing on using data mapping to look at deprivation in the districts and using this intelligence to pinpoint areas for further targeted communication and early intervention work. We'll be building stronger links with the communities and rents teams to target areas where collaborative working would bring benefits for residents, including using rent sense data to target where help is needed. We'll be taking part in a pilot with Anglian Water to ensure social tariffs are more easily accessible, and we'll be taking part in the development of a food security plan for Suffolk alongside Community Action Suffolk. We'll also be introducing an internal referral form between Babergh Citizens Advice and Babergh Mid-Suffolk District Council to speed up the referral process and get help quickly to those who need it. We'll be continuing with targeted communication campaigns as and when required to ensure residents are kept well informed. And we'll be signposting to appropriate low-income tariffs when households move from temporary to permanent accommodation. And just in terms of what will be happening with the draft strategy from here and its journey to endorsement and adoption, there'll be a period of public consultation running from Monday the 4th of December to Sunday the 14th of January. During this time, there'll be an all-member briefing sessions for all members to ask further questions. The feedback gathered from consultation will be evaluated. Amendments, if necessary, will then be made to the strategy, and the strategy will go to council meetings in March for final approval and adoption.
Thank you, Rebecca. Councillor Grandon first.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is going back to your priority 4. You stated that one of the things that you were planning to do was considering a charge to landlords to come onto the scheme. Can you tell me what your thinking behind this is when there's a shortage of landlords generally in the whole sector, in private and non-private sector? You know, what you hope to achieve apart from some income, but why would they want to come onto the scheme if you're going to charge them when there's a shortage of landlords? It sort of seems a little bit of a surprise that you might be disincentivising people. Please, could you explain it?
Yep, sure.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot there, actually. I think if you're a landlord and you've got a property to let, you will need someone to let that property out. And if you can let it out for yourself, if you want to manage it yourself, so you know you take care of it, there won't be any, you won't have to pay any fees. But most landlords will place their property with a letting agent, which will cost them money. So for a landlord who's looking to let a property out, one of the things they'll consider the most will be which agent is offering the cheapest fees, perhaps. So for us, at the moment, we offer a free service, and the service we offer is very good. It's very comprehensive and very similar to what you would get for a paid service. So the charge that we would be looking to introduce, and that's kind of like a 3-step process because there are things that have to happen in between because we're a council. So we'd have to set ourselves up as a social lettings agency, and you can only charge a token amount. We're not about making a profit, but what we're about is trying to generate some revenue to help to pay for the service. So the charge that we would make would be very low. On our recent landlord survey, we kind of split. We put the question out there to our landlords to ask how much you would pay for a service like ours. So we have, I mean, the figures that came back were, you know, we only gave them sort of small amounts. You know, high street agents may charge 18-20% of the rent per month. You know, we're thinking of between 1% and 5%. So it's more a token charge. We do put a lot of time, resource, and effort. The amount of how we run the service in terms of sort of what the landlord would get as a free service. There's a lot of work that goes in. It would be very, I mean, it's free at the moment, so it's very good value for money at the moment, but it would still give very, very good value for money for a landlord, we think.
I'll add to that and say, I think there are extra things that we have as local authority. So because housing standard sits within our service area, so in terms of making sure the properties are meeting the right standards, you know, in terms of the compliance that landlords have to stick to, they can get advice from our housing standards team, so we can link them in. So what we do, I think, is slightly more than a lettings agency in a sense, because we have access to the environmental health officers who will go out and check a property and provide advice to any landlords that approach us for help and assistance and wanted to join the scheme. So that is offered as well. So there's lots of things that we do. I mean, in terms of if their tenant runs into rent arrears, because it's rent guaranteed, we pick that up. But then we will deal with antisocial behaviour issues. We'll go out there, we'll deal with that, we'll pull in the services that are required. So the things they don't even have to think about that we will pick up and do, which they may not probably get from a letting agency per se, who would first instinct is to go out and evict the tenant, whereas we're going to work with somebody to make sure that's sustainable and how can we work it out, and is this the right setting for that individual? Because there are times where that's not the appropriate setting, so we work as a whole system service in terms of talking to choice-based lettings and is there an more appropriate setting for this individual rather than this placement. So I think what we offer is quite superior to what letting agents do, and Steph's team does an absolutely fabulous job at that as well.
Can I just add to that? So I sort of assumed that you knew what the service offer was, because there are, as Emma said, in this package that the landlord gets, so you would weigh up if it's worth the charge that you're paying. So the landlord does get guaranteed rent. So if a tenant moves out, there are no voids, so that period would be covered. There is at the moment a cash incentive for a landlord that joins the scheme, so you could offset any sort of lower amount that you would take each month in rent with the cash incentive. All of the tenancy management is covered, so you would get the inventory, the routine inspections, repair coordination, right through to checkout. You wouldn't incur rent arrears should a tenant get into rent arrears and we can't resolve that with them. Then unfortunately it would be the council that takes the risk, the hit. So some landlords that we have on our scheme, that works financially better for them than letting it through an agent and paying a little bit more. But it's horses for courses.
Thank you. I understand it much better now.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Chair. As I understand it, some of our temporary housing units have a mix of tenants. They'll have families alongside people with a history of antisocial behaviour and drug use. And I wonder what sort of support we're giving to people in that situation. I mean, are we providing a lot of warden visits? Could we provide more?
I'll ask Mick to answer that. I mean, we try not to mix anymore, like we used to in times in the past we did. Mick, thank you.
So I'm really pleased to say that for most of our family accommodation, it is self-contained. We rarely place families in units or sharing facilities, only in an absolute emergency. And then that we will be looking to move that person or that household on to self-contained as soon as possible. Generally, our single people, perhaps who have mental health or drug or alcohol, are sort of accommodated in our HMO, so our rooms where they're sharing facilities. And we have a lot more of a staff presence now, thanks to our team, which has grown. So.
We also provide some services from a security firm as well that do drive-arounds to our temporary accommodation in the night as well, to just make sure that everything's okay. And also because we provide accommodation for individuals fleeing domestic abuse, so we want people to feel safe as well, so we do use that service.
Okay, it's just from my understanding, there are issues at places in Sudbury, for example, where there is mix of tenancies, so it is obviously still happening. I just wondered if we're aware of that.
Where would that be, Councillor Dixon?
It's called, can't remember off the top of my head, but I can find out for you.
Yes, it would be good to know. So we have Sandringham Court. They are a mixture of bed sits and 1-bed and 2-bed flats, but they are all self-contained. We've got the Firs, which is a house of multiple occupation. The Lees, which is the same. And we've got Warner Place, which is run by Orwell. And then we have some separate little properties, we call them satellites, which are our own stock houses. But in those units, we don't have families in the Firs or the Lees, do we? No.
Okay. We'll get some more details in and come back to you.
Do, yeah, please do.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. My question's about temporary accommodation as well. To speed up the speed that people get moved on from temporary accommodation, are they placed in Band A in the when they're moved on?
So the system is complex. So when we accommodate somebody into temporary accommodation, we then assess their homeless application. So the banding is based on their homeless application, and then other factors go into that. So Band B is an accepted homelessness case. We also have a Band B options, which is somebody at the beginning of the journey that we know is going to be an accepted case at the end. We do have options to award Band A's. We look at exceptional circumstances, we look at the makeup of that family and any needs that they've got within that household, and we make that decision. And we go to a panel in the Gateway team to look at that and consider. It would be lovely to have everybody in temporary accommodation on a Band A and move people on quickly. However, we've got the rest of the of the housing register, who also have some massive needs. We've got people in accommodation in our general needs stock that need to be moved for medical reasons, and they're a band aid. So we've got all of those factors. It's very hard, but we can look at that as an option. And we get information from social workers, GPs about households that particularly do meet the criteria for a higher band, and then we assess it all. So we can do.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Caston.
Thank you, Chair. To deliver the strategy, we need help from partners. Who are the most important partners in that, and will we need to consider the funding of those partners or assistance with funding? Sorry about the question.
Christmas, what would we like, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's always nice to have more funding. I think the partners we need to be working with more closely is probably mental health, because that's what we see, that's what most of the need is for. I think it's also about making sure that sometimes it's not always about money, it's about how effectively we work and collaborate with our partners to make sure that when you're dealing with households, we all have the same information, we're working together rather than sort of sometimes butting heads or working against each other tends to be the situation, because actually we all have the ultimate same goal, is to assist someone to help them from stop them from being homeless or getting them out of temporary accommodation to more permanent accommodation that's suitable for their needs. So I suppose for me, to deliver the service, some of the things, I think for me, one of the important things that we do is the tenancy sustainment financial inclusion work that we do, because that's 10-year blind for all our residents. And I think in a situation where we are facing cost of living crisis, where more and more people are struggling, whether you own your own home or whether you're renting, having a 10-year neutral tenancy sustainment financial inclusion service, which is free at the point of delivery, where people can come in, obviously working really well with our partners in citizen advice, so that we work across the piece to support residents in these times. It's one of the things I think that's really underpinning it. That's from my perspective. I don't know if Sarah and Susanna have anything they want to contribute to that in terms of what they're seeing from their end of the spectrum.
I'm part of the early intervention team, and we are seeing obviously a lot more people coming through from mental health. We are seeing landlords serving notice. So yeah, it's just increasing.
And I would also say that we're seeing people coming through from supported housing schemes. So the supported housing providers cannot deal with the level of need that those people are being placed with, and that's really, really sad. A few years ago, we had some schemes that had higher levels of support. They are now being drawn back, so they're only offering low and to medium levels of support, and it's just not good enough. So we're getting people being evicted from supported housing and coming to us, and we can't meet their need. However, they've been evicted from the place that should be able to meet their need, and that's a massive issue for us, really massive. You know that, Councillor Carter, don't you? It's horrendous, and that's really sad for our residents as well, that we can't provide completely what they need, and neither now can supported housing. But that's a whole other ball game, isn't it? Go on, press your button.
It's very new to this. We've been working on a case at the moment. So a lot of people, obviously, we come through the homelessness route, but there are other routes into helping people, and I think in the early intervention team, that's what we're trying to do. Like, there is another route that you can come in, and you're still going to get the same result, but maybe not through the homelessness route. We've got a particular case that's come from social services. Now, the lady hasn't got capacity, and which is obviously very highly documented. So she hasn't got the capacity to make a homelessness application. So even though we can't help her through the homelessness route, there is another route that we can take, which is through the housing register. So that's what we're trying to work, and we work with our partners on that, and there's lots of meetings, but it is sometimes hard to get social services aware that it isn't just homelessness, there is another big broader route, and that's obviously what we do in the early intervention team, is trying to prevent that person coming through a homelessness route, which technically they can't do. So trying to look at all the options, and that's what we do.
Councillor Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. Follow-up point to Councillor Grandon's question on central Suffolk lettings. When we first talked about this a few weeks ago, I was really quite surprised at the business itself, but also the compelling offer that it has. What's our plan to extend the profile of Central Suffolk lettings, and have you considered some of the real pinch points of where we get sort of penalised with private rents? Tends to be in the more rural communities where there's a different sort of financial driver for lettings. Have we considered like some kind of public-private partnership with farmers and estate owners that have property that are less likely to release that property simply because it's not probably in A1 condition? And a second question under priority 5, for tenants in particularly single tenants in private accommodation, the Anglian Water issue on tariffs is really quite a big problem, because you often find in older properties again, Anglian Water are less inclined or can't fit meters, which means they revert back to the rateable value, which means you can have a single person paying, you know, £40-50 a month for their water charges. So it's a really good point, and I think that's a real problem with rental properties.
Yeah, I can answer a little bit of that if you like. With regards to sort of access and pitching out to people that have multiple land and property, like the farm industry that you mentioned, I know of sort of quite a large portfolio holder over on the peninsula way with a lot of properties. Yes, we'd love to get out there and have them all on our books. You know, we'd do it tomorrow. I think it's, for us as a council, we're limited to a degree in terms of budget for publicity and marketing. So sometimes it's difficult to do a widespread approach that perhaps a high street letting agent could do. Sometimes people or landlords may not think of the council as their first thought for lettings. We have, and that will come in with our work we do around working with other departments at the council, like economic development, planning. So it's about raising our corporate profile, really, because we have the links out there, but we're here at the bottom, so it's making sure that the rest of the council are, you know, why are we building all of these houses, and why are you not giving some to Central Suffolk Lettings to let out? You know, we need to get our profile raised corporately, so that we can have that avenue, so that we can, because as we know, stock is diminishing in the private rented sector. There's 5 million people that live in the private rented sector in the UK. We have no choice. We have to, and we should be working with the private rented sector. We should have an offer for the private rented sector. We have a good offer. We're reputable. We're not going anywhere. We're the council. So for a business and a landlord, we do offer some security. It's just about how do we pitch to them. I can pitch to them, but I kind of need the corporate support and the business support to know where they are and how to do it. And I think we've established ourselves now. I never like to pitch or launch a scheme when we're not proved, so I didn't want to launch it. We launched in COVID, which was like a crazy time to launch, but now we're sort of 3 years in, and we've got a team, and we know our successes and we know our failings. It's a much better time to take a stronger offer to the market. And with regards to the water question, we have that a lot because we've got a tenant support officer who goes out to our portfolio properties. There's a lot of support, particularly at the moment, for help with utility costs for people who are on prepaid meters. There's lots of grants that come through agencies such as Aaron Services about insulation, windows. So there are help for landlords. A lot of landlords are not even aware of the support. But lots of because we're out there so much in our tenancies, we can pick up on points like that. So our tenant support officer would sort of pick up on issues, certainly like that for our tenancies, and be able to help sort them out, I think, and speak to Anglian Water directly.
Sort of just want to add to what Stephen was saying. One of the things I'm quite keen for us to do is to consider turning Central Suffolk Lettings into either a community interest, community benefit type organisation, so that we're an ethical lettings agency. That would allow us, because at the moment, as a local authority, we can't grant tenancies that aren't secure. And that tends to be one of the stumbling blocks for us, in a sense, about what we do with Central Suffolk Lettings going forward. So we are exploring the options of, could we become a community benefit? Could we become a community interest company where you're non-for-profit and you're working for the community, but we're also widening the access into private sector renting. I have worked in other local authorities that have done community benefit companies where they have bought properties, but then that all depends on your circumstances as well and what your business plan is. So we're exploring the options of going forward, what does that look like, so that we can be not necessarily a little bit more commercial, but have more flexibility and adaptability within the market, and look at what sort of offer that we offer out to residents, to landlords as a whole, because I'm quite keen for us to explore the idea of having intermediate market rents, because everyone's at different levels, you know, and everyone needs different access to different types of accommodation. I know that we have issues within Suffolk attracting, say, workers into the NHS. Is there something that we could provide a product out there in terms of rental units? So there's lots of things that we could be doing to leverage on that. So we're definitely looking at that as part of that whole priority, as what happens, what do we do, and what do we offer?
Members, I've got 3 councillors booked in to ask a question. At the end of those 3, I'm going to draw the questions to a close. We've had a very long session, and I'll explain what we're going to do after that. So the next one is Councillor Smith. Thank you.
Thank you. The report mentions empty homes coming back into use, and the Houses for Homes that was launched earlier this year. I just wondered if there's been any success with that yet.
We have had some success with that. I can send you information about what's been happening. We have managed to bring some properties back into use. Properties have definitely been identified. Having 2 officers as opposed to 1, as we've previously had, has made a vast amount of difference in terms of our reach. And definitely working with landlords in terms of owners, what they do to bring their properties back into use helps reduce issues around ASB, making the communities nicer as well if the home is not being kept up to date. But we can provide you information. They've done actually a really good report in terms of where they are now and what they've done, so we can share that if you'd like as well. Yeah.
Councillor Grandin.
Thank you, Chair. I've had situations in my ward where people who have had mental health concerns have been placed in our housing and have sort of caused great upset and concern to other residents near them, their neighbours. Now I can see that it's a very difficult situation from everyone's point of view, but I wonder if there's a better solution, and what, in an ideal world, what would you like to do in that kind of situation? And if there is an ideal world, are we anywhere on the way to achieving that? Because, you know, I've had at least 2 situations where it's caused very great difficulties where that's concerned. Thank you.
I think it is really difficult because sometimes we have people in our temporary accommodation for quite a while and they manage really well and they thrive, and then we think they're ready for move on. And there have been times where people have been placed in permanent accommodation within our own stock where we thought it was going to work and it would be fine, it's a good setting, because sometimes you're not going to know until someone goes in. But we do try and make sure there is support on hand in terms of support for the individual to help them to manage the tenancy. But sometimes you are not going to know what those issues are going to be because you don't actually know how people are going to react to each other. And sometimes that's what it boils down to. So you'll find that we have seen those residents where we have placed them in different settings that it hasn't worked, and then we've gone a 3rd time and actually it's worked remarkably well with the community they've been placed into. And it unfortunately sometimes it's a bit of trial and error, because you're not going to know how something's going to work out, because there are times where you've placed someone and you think this may not work, it might not be ideal, and it's ended up working really well. I think we've had some people go into tenancies where they've thrived, you know, become a really engaging part of the community. You know, their mental health is being managed effectively, and it's been a great setting for them. So there are instances where we're not successful, and that is with everything in life. But we always try and manage that situation effectively as much as we can. And there'll always be that input in terms of how do we sustain that tenancy if we can, because that's always the first port of call. What things can we do in order to make it successful? But then there will be periods of times when we look at the situation, we've done everything we possibly can do to make it work, and it might not be, we have to look at the impact on the individual that's in that tenancy, as well as the other tenants around them, and balance that quite effectively. And then we will make decisions of whether or not, okay, depending on the circumstances in that particular case, we might take that person out of the property, and then look at how we can then look at what the next best placement is for them. I think the issue is, as Vicky alluded to, in terms of the housing related support, it's not, people are being evicted from there because it's not working effectively, and we have a lot more residents with quite a number of high needs that need to be managed effectively. General needs, we would always say, is not always the best place for people with high needs, because some people just need to be in supported housing, high support, and they need that intensive management. So it's just incredibly difficult, because if the resource is not there, then we have to try and do the best we can with the resources that we do have to hand. So that is a lot of trial and error sometimes, unfortunately. Is like, you look, when we allocate something, officers do look at where they're being placed, look at that individual. We talk to Michaela's team, how they managed in temporary accommodation. So sometimes I think the temporary accommodation team, the officers do lots of visits, don't they? So they go out quite regularly, they build a rapport with the individual, people become really well versed in their location, and it settles them. But I think it's that transition period and not knowing what happens when you do that permanent placement, because you place people and it goes remarkably well, and it's great for them and their surrounding neighbours. And sometimes people get a placement and it doesn't work and it breaks down. And as long as we make sure that we have processes in place to deal with what happens when it breaks down, how we can pick things up, how we manage that effectively, that is probably the best that we can offer given the current resources.
Can I just say, Councillor Grandin, that I know who you're talking about, and I know that that person was told that their needs were too high for supported housing, and yet they weren't high enough to have a social worker. So we were stuck between a terrible rock and a hard place at where this person fits in. I mean, you and I know that person needs social care intervention. So it's a real shame. So there are some areas that we really need to work better with different services, or they need to be better working with us. So I do appreciate your point.
And the final question from Councillor Jameson. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you feel that single men tend to be disadvantaged when it comes to rehoming? I mean, possibly understandably, but is there anything we can do, if they are, to stop them getting left behind?
I don't think that they're disadvantaged in our system, no, at all, because our system is if you have a priority need under homelessness, we can pick you up into our temporary accommodation and take a homeless application. If you're a rough sleeper, we also look at picking you up and putting you down the rough sleeper route. So I don't think that they are disadvantaged as per the myth that has been in the past. However, we do see more single males becoming homeless than we do single females.
I think I'll add to that and say, I think pre-HRA, the Homelessness Reduction Act, there wasn't much of an offer for the singles, and that tended to be single men. With the way the legislation is structured, we have a duty to prevent. That doesn't look at priority need, that actually looks at, within those 56 days, how do we prevent you from being homeless? Whether you're male, female, whatever, we're there to pick you up. So that has actually resolved that issue of, if you were a man, fit, healthy, you were literally told to go away and sort yourself out. We now, we do personal housing plans. I've got a housing solution officer that will work with them. So they're part of the process. They're not forgotten about now with the change in legislation. It focuses our mind on preventing. And you're not, as an officer, you should not be thinking of if someone's intentionally homeless, if they're in priority need, because that's not what you're looking at. what you're looking at prevention stage is, are you threatened with homelessness within 56 days, and are you eligible? That's it. So for me, my expectation of officers is you pick up a case, how do I stop this individual from becoming homeless? What can I do with them within the next 56 days? Work together, you know, how do we find them accommodation? What are the other barriers they're facing? So I would agree with Vicky that since 2018, that should not be the case anymore, that we have a statutory duty. No, that makes it really clear about what we should be focused on and doing within that first 56 days when they're threatened with homelessness.
Can I just add to your point quickly? Sorry, I know we're in a rush on that point. I think with the under 35, particularly single male group that we see, I don't think it's I think we don't have the stock out there to suit that client group, so we don't have many one beds affordable or shared. That's the problem, which probably perhaps you're thinking that there's more single men out there, is because there's not the property to suit them, especially in the private rented sector. I mean, and, you know, HMOs are really good for that. They can be really affordable, but, you know, it's an aspiration. It should be an aspiration for everyone to want to have self-contained. Not everybody wants shared. So I think in our district, as Babergh and Mid, we do lack sort of the property to suit single people. That's a big issue, and I find in the private rented sector anyway.
We've come to the end of the questions. Members, before we go to debate, I'm going to call a 5-minute break because Mid Suffolk have got Yeah, I need a gavel. Welcome back, members, after that short break. Well, we finished a very long session of questions, which I think members found really helpful. And so we now go into debate. Who would like to start the debate? Councillor Piper, would you?
Yeah, can I just say I think the Housing Solutions team do a fantastic job. I've initially, have had some experience over the past few months with the Ukrainian family we were hosting, and the work they did in getting them temporary accommodation was fantastic. They really pulled out the stops. So yeah, I think they do a fantastic job, and whatever we can do to improve what they can do would be a really good thing, I think.
Councillor Scarr?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo that. I think the depth and the breadth of the work that the team have presented this morning is truly tremendous. So much information there for members. Coming round perhaps to what we might consider for an extra recommendation to move things on a little bit, I think we need to support very strongly the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation. And I accept that has some costs and a lot of work associated with it, but I think if we support that very strongly, we are in a much better position should there be any further future government funding for rough sleeping initiatives, because there may well be, and I think we'll be judged based on what we've delivered over that period of time, and that's an incredibly important part of it. And also, we heard about the resources required, the financial implications when the Rough Sleeper Initiative funding ends in 2025, and I think that really is a very serious issue, because I would hate to think that we actually have to tailor our offer based on more limited financial resources. Otherwise, we lose all the benefits that we've achieved with the team over all that working over that period of time. So a strong recommendation, perhaps just to Cabinet, that we are aware of that situation, and we expect Cabinet to be preparing for, over the coming years, the ending of that financial support from central government, on the basis that we have to prepare for the ending of it, even if there may well be another round that we could bid into. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I completely agree with the two recommendations Councillor Scarf put in there. I think they're fantastic. I think this is a really good piece of work. It's amazing, like the amount of work that's going on. It covers a lot of the cases where it's really interesting to see what's actually going on and how much the team are doing. I'm still really worried about this going forward, homelessness in Mid-Suffolk and Babergh, because the districts have changed so much since 2019. It's shocking. I was here in 2019, and it was a completely different environment for it. I think one of the things that really stood out is it's almost impossible to do that really early prevention if people won't come to you, if you can't find the people that need that help, and getting in there before, like, the county court judgments and all the things that step in the way of people that aren't easy to put right is really, really difficult. It occurred to me that maybe we could advertise what we do more. Maybe we could have a campaign on buses, in supermarkets, saying, look, this is what we do. We're here to help. And it's not just for people that have to leave their property. It's for people that they know that every month they've got more going out than coming in, and that it's not sustainable. And I think that would be a really, really great thing for the council to do, to just get in there early, because that saves us money as well when we do that. The other thing, we talked about under 35s on here and how difficult it is to help them. And there's another issue with this, and it's the under 25s. The young people that don't get the same benefits. It still costs them the same to live in a house, but they don't have the benefits. They end up sofa surfing and in really unhappy situations where they have to stay because they've got nowhere else to go. And I think we maybe going forward do need to look a little bit more into under 25s as well as the under 35s, because it does change a bit with the under 25s and in the next 10 years. But for me, I think this is really good. I think it's the situation that's happening in the districts that worries me, not the work that's been done, because that's fantastic. But thank you very much.
Were you suggesting, Councillor Caston, that we, I don't know whether we do this, but I would support any letter to the corporate manager and her team for the work they do and the comprehensive report. I mean, I think it was a very comprehensive report. Would we be happy to do something like that? It's separate. We don't normally do it, but it was and they worked very hard. Is that what you were suggesting? Or?
Well, I'm quite happy to put that to the committee and for people to...
well, that's up to everybody
to lead that. And also we've got portfolio holders and officers in the room that are listening. So, thank you.
I think it's we don't normally do it, but one has to be impressed with what the team were doing, and that early intervention has actually been beneficial to... I work with rough sleepers, and I mean, it's very hard work and very intensive and very comprehensive. But I'd be happy to accept that as and I'm not sure it's a recommendation, but we could give it to Alicia to execute, couldn't we?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was particularly impressed with the Central Suffolk Lettings part of the business that we operate. And I really strongly believe that we have such a great offering, and it will allow us to, by improving the profile of Central Suffolk Lettings, it will give us the opportunity to bring that into the strategy of the council as a whole, such that we start to look at the way we plan in the countryside. You know, part of the JLP, part 2 potentially, so that we can release and create more ability to build flats and or single 2-bedroom kind of properties, and working almost in like a public-private partnership with landowners and with property owners, because I think we're sort of hiding what is a really gem underneath the stone to some extent, and anybody who's a private landowner will know the challenges of getting people in, getting people out, dealing with all the issues, and also more to the point, letting firms where we're doing an amazing job. So I'd like to think that we could potentially enhance our reputation by building a profile, but at the same time build what we do into the whole strategy of the joint councils.
Thank you. Any more comments from members? Oh, sorry. Walter.
Thank you. As I said previously, this is night and day compared to what I've experienced, and I can't commend the work enough, what has been done. This has certainly negated some of the fears and stigmas that I was under previously. I'd like to second the proposals and the comments made from my colleagues the other side of the room, because you've all picked up on things that we do and we need to work on, especially Councillor Caston's fears, and we do need to work on those. You mentioned regarding the advertisement on buses. Well, we can do more as well, placing advertisements in areas that would be like used for shelter, putting up so like bike racks are sometimes frequented, but it's putting up tents, areas of things. So actually, if we are having a certain day where we're going to be holding these, where people's going to be available, to have it advertised for not only it's sort of letting people in that situation know that we are thinking, that we are going towards, even not going towards it, even if they don't make the steps themselves, just to know that we may be looking to help. So if it's just advertised and making it reassurance, especially in the media at the moment where the talk has been in the media regarding lifestyle shows, oyster a lot, it's become stigmatised, it's become even more ingrained in society, and people are fearing that we are trying to take things away, that we are trying to move them on, and it is something that we do need to work on towards reassuring to build back some trust. So all recommendations that we have made today, fully support, and we can do anything we can do. If we can do more, we should do it. So thank you.
Any more comments by committee members? No? Right, Alicia. Do we need to deal with Councillor Scarf's recommendations first? Because he proposed, well, we didn't really get a proposal, but we need a proposer and a seconder for those before we put them in any order. Do we need that first?
That's fine. We would propose and vote on block for them, okay. But I have written down rough recommendations based on what Councillor Scarf has said, so I just wanted to read them out just to make sure that they make sense before we go any further. So I have that Cabinet explores further methods of meeting the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation. Is that roughly what you were talking about with your first recommendation?
Sorry, yes, strong support from this joint committee for the accreditation process.
That's fine. And the second recommendation from yourself is that Cabinet makes further plans to provide financial support for the services provided under the strategy beyond the end of the Rough Sleeper Initiative funding in 2025. Sorry, it's fine. So those were the two recommendations from Councillor Scarf, but I do have 3 more recommendations based on what was said by other committee members, if you'd like me to read all of them out now. Okay. So recommendation 1 is that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee commends the Housing Department for the work that they are conducting to help eradicate homelessness in the districts, and requests that officers take on board the comments made at this meeting. Number 2, which is a recommendation that's been pulled out of the report, which says that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee supports the vision and priorities of the draft homelessness reduction and rough sleeping strategy, and ensures that the delivery plan is reflective of the current challenges facing the districts. I have recommendation 3, which is the one about the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation, which is just read out. Recommendation 4, that Cabinet makes further plans to provide financial support for the services at the end of the Rough Sleeper Initiative funding in 2025. And I also have, as recommendation 5, Councillor Caston's point, which is that Cabinet explores further means of providing assistance to those under 25 with getting onto the housing ladder in order to avoid an influx of young people becoming homeless.
Councillor Carter.
Just regarding the recommendation 1, on the comments made by our housing officers and also by, could we maybe look at altering the language rather than eradicating homeless, rough sleeping, which does seem to be a bit of a, yeah. Thank you.
Actually, I support that, Councillor Carter.
Sounds like a game of whack-a-mole.
Right. Is everybody happy with what Alicia...
Could I just, I did say about them considering more allocation of resources towards promoting the services that the housing team do to, for early prevention, to try and help get the word out that that's what we're there to do, and we can do it long before you have to leave your home. I don't know if, obviously I've said that in the meeting and it'd be taken on board, but I don't know if we want to have a recommendation that we look into how we can advertise and promote those, and what we would need, like budget-wise, to deal with extra people should there be more.
Councillor Weinman, sorry.
May we include an element of Central Suffolk lettings into that overall gambit of enhancing and improving the awareness of what we do?
Yep, that's absolutely fine. If you give me a minute to craft that into a sentence, that'd be fine. Hang on a second. Okay, so using those points, I have written down that Cabinet explores providing more resources to the Housing Department to assist with communicating about the services available from both the councils and Central Suffolk lettings to those who are or are at risk of becoming homeless.
Yeah, that's perfect, thank you.
Okay, so we now have 6 recommendations. Recommendation 1, that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee commends the Housing Department for the work that they are conducting to help reduce homelessness in the districts, and requests that officers take on board the comments made at the meeting. Recommendation 2, that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee supports the vision and priorities of the draft homelessness reduction and rough sleeping strategy, and ensures that the delivery plan is reflective of the current challenges facing the districts. Recommendation 3, that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee strongly supports the work being undertaken to meet the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation. Recommendation 4, that Cabinet makes further plans to provide financial support for the services provided under the strategy beyond the end of the Rough Sleeper Initiative funding in 2025. Recommendation 5, that Cabinet explores further means of providing assistance to those under 25 with getting onto the housing ladder in order to avoid an influx of young people becoming homeless. Recommendation 6, that Cabinet explores providing more resources to the Housing Department to assist with communicating about the services that are available from both the councils and Central Suffolk lettings to those who are or are at risk of becoming homeless. Thank you, Chair.
Can I have a proposer, please?
Sorry, just one thing.
Oh, sorry.
By housing ladder, are we talking about buying a property or getting because I'm not quite sure whether the housing ladder means owning a property, and then that recommendation wouldn't be quite what I'm trying to say.
Well, it would depend what you do want it to say. So
Could we change it to adequately housed? To get adequately housed. Sorry, I don't know, I'm struggling to say it, but because I think housing ladder suggests people with a lot more opportunity to get a roof over their heads than we're talking about.
That's fine. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Recommendation 5 would now read that Cabinet explores further means of providing assistance to those under 25 with becoming adequately housed in order to avoid an influx of young people becoming homeless. That's fine.
So, Councillor Jameson, you're going to propose the recommendations. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Scarr.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress on Modern Gov. Thank you, Chair. Members, that is 11 votes for, so that is unanimous.
Thank you, Alicia. So we now go to item 8, which is JOS/23/28, Overview and Scrutiny Committee Action Tracker. Do any members have comments to make on that? Sir Jameson.
Yeah, just noticed on the sewage reference, there seems to be a lot not started yet, some with target dates of October. Just wondered what was happening there.
I'm just looking at them on the action tracker now. One of them says not started when it should say complete, to be honest. Two of them do, which is my fault completely. That is in relation to 1.2 and 1.6. In regards to 1.4 and 1.5 that are not started, I will take that away and see if we can get some action going on that, because they really should be started by now, because it was about 2 months ago now, so that's fine. I'll take them away outside of a meeting and see what we can do.
Page 109, please. And the third item down is a review of the current costs of the West Suffolk Community Safety Partnership. And Madam Chairman, thank you for your email on this, and I accept that we're going to have things in the next annual review report. Can I suggest that we add to 1.3 when this report might be expected? So, so we know that ongoing means something's happening rather than it's fallen into the globber.
That's fine, Councillor Riley. I can't add that to the actual recommendation, but what I will do is in that progress column, I will add that it will be coming back to in the next annual report, and the chairs will keep on top of that and make sure the officers are aware that that information needs to be in there, and we will be holding them to that recommendation in the next annual report. As I say, I can't add it to a recommendation that's already been voted on, but I'll add it into the progress section just to keep an eye on it.
Okay, thank you. Similarly, if you go down to item 3.3, the office has been requested to undertake an annual survey. If the survey is going to take place till March, then I can understand them, sitting around for a couple of months. On the other hand, if there's no deadline on this, it'll sit around forever and be ongoing. Is it possible that, I'm quite happy for the officers to, give us a suggestion as to when this annual survey will be done and completed.
Yep, so from recollection, that was meant to be implemented at some point in this financial year, and that was essentially almost an endorsement of what officers were already going to be doing anyway. But so my process after each committee meeting is I contact the key officers that are listed in the column, and I ask for an update on all the recommendations that are still outstanding. It's the Chief Planning Officer that is related to that item, so I will have a discussion with him as to whether that survey has been put in place yet, and provide you with an update.
So if you then turn over to page 110, items 3.4, 5, 6, and 7. Again, all ongoing. I say, whenever I've been at committees where I've raised queries, I've been told it's ongoing and it's a device to shut me up, so it doesn't mean anything. Whereas if we have a time on this, then we know that something is being done or is being thought about. Thank you.
dates on that, Alicia? That was pre this committee. What I will suggest, Councillor Riley, that the chairs and vice chairs together will just look at some of these items that are quite long standing, and we can come back to the committee with our findings, can't we? Do you agree with that, James?
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe some of these red, not started ones need to be sent straight to Cabinet as well. And
Yeah,
that these
we need to do something proactive about
they should
it.
get a list every Cabinet meeting of what we're still waiting for.
No, that's fine. I take those comments on board. We are sort of behind the scenes now trying to put together some better processes for getting these recommendations through to Cabinet to make sure they're seen in a timely manner and something is done about our recommendations, and that falls under the Cabinet Scrutiny Protocol that got approved this time last year. So there is procedure in place to help push those through. We're just going to try and give them an extra nudge, which is what we're working on behind the scenes, myself and the monitoring officer.
Councillor Riley, is that acceptable to you? So, members, please note that the overview and scrutiny action tracker is only for noting, and we will take up any discussion we've had, and the chairs will discuss that. This concludes the business of this meeting at 1:33. Can I thank everybody for coming? Oh, Councillor